minor cultural grievances like Republicans being called racist or something. Do you understand? Like, unity from the point of view of like Joe Biden is Joe Biden's destroying the Muslim ban. Okay, like that's not. Why is that a legislative agenda item for the Republicans? Like the trans military ban or the Muslim ban? It's just idiotic. So Joe Biden reversing those decisions is whatever. It's not the worst thing. If Joe Biden was to advocate for larger tax hikes for the wealthy and corporations, then you have a real problem. Then you have a real legislative problem. So for Republicans, and because that's not going to happen, for Republicans, the thing that they're going to cry about is like, oh, they called us white supremacists.
Truth, and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit.
And that's why Ben is going to now say, well, he's mentioning lies, and he's going to say that, like, you know, Republicans are the ones who are lying, and that's not very unifying, bro.
The problem, of course, is that, again, when it comes to our politics, there are a lot of folks on the left who don't agree with that. They just agree with what they agree with. To folks on the left, it is a simple fact that America was rooted in racism, for example. To a lot of folks on the left, it is a simple fact that the police are systemically bigoted. To a lot of folks on the left, it is a simple fact that the gender pay gap is due to instinctive and ingrained American sexism. Right? All of these are considered facts. Now, everything I just said, each one of those statements is an opinion. It happens to be based on very scanty evidence. When Joe Biden says that we have to distinguish between facts and lies, does he mean that in the very real sense in which 2 + 2 = 4 and 2 + 2 = 5 are not the same? Or does he mean things I disagree with will be considered as though they are lies, and things I agree with will be considered as though they are...
He took a long way of driving home that exact same thing that I was saying, but that's basically what he's saying. He's saying that, like, left operates on their own set of facts, and they're not real facts. And he's basically saying everything that Republicans advocate for are not facts.
Are facts. This is a very, very...
Again, like, it's great. It's great to be so predictable because, you know, it's how Republicans are. That all of the things that people endlessly deliberate on, or all of the things that people, you know, have conducted numerous studies on, I'm just going to say they're shaky without any evidence whatsoever. As my camera shakes, I'm not going to prove to you that those are shaky. I'm not even going to give you exactly what the fucking incorrect statements are. And then I'm going to follow on, I'm going to follow through by telling you that Republicans are, you know, Republicans just simply want to have their point be heard in the conversation, but it's not because they're immediately called out as lying grifters, because they are.
Important question, because during the Obama administration, it was very much the latter. Okay, which brings us to the third theme of Biden's inaugural address, and that was the crises that America faces.
A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer.
Okay, that is a political statement. It is not an objective statement of fact. There is no crisis of race relations in the United States other than the opinions that people hold about race relations. And the solutions that he's going to propose for that, as we will talk about in a second, are going to verge on the racially discriminatory themselves. And then finally, he talked about climate change.
Oh, it's like the oldest fucking conservative line in the book, dude. It's not the racism that's the problem. It's actually doing anti-racism that's the problem, because anti-racism is inherently racist. And that racism is poof, gone actually. And it's much better to, again, feel like racism is gone and it's no longer a problem in a country where there are clearly some very different outcomes for members of individual races. But, you know, that's on purpose, if you ask Ben Shapiro. That's because these people aren't just trying hard enough. But yeah, it's great. It's actually not the racism that's the problem. It's doing something about it. Of course, the question that you should ask people is, okay, well, if racial discrimination occurred throughout history along racial boundaries, how could you correct those mistakes without literally fucking focusing on, at least at some level, the race of the individual that's still experiencing the intergenerational discrimination or the consequences of that? Well, you know, that's you're asking stupid questions in that situation, because this person does not want to solve problems like caused by redlining, or solve problems that are caused by centuries of slavery and offering no fucking restitution as a consequence of that to black people, for example. Yeah. It is, in essence, no different than saying it's actually racist to abolish slavery because, you know, you're hurting the white people that need slavery to continue. What about all those white people that need slaves to continue their businesses? Which is an argument that Confederates made, so. It's actually more racist to abolish slavery.
As an existential crisis for the United States, the solutions that he has proposed to climate change are utterly ineffectual. He has yet to prove that it is a crisis on the level of the immediate. And if he is talking about the crisis that is supposed to occur over the course of the next 100 years, he has not proposed any solutions that are directed towards solving that crisis. Those are the themes of his speech. Unity, which is, again, an empty vessel. It's got to be filled in. Facts versus lies. Empty vessel has to be filled in. And crises, 2 of the 4 that he mentions, are controversial to say the least. Which brings us to the second issue here. So for a guy who is unifying, you would assume that he would find some consensus policies, and then he would build around those consensus policies.
Just give me a crumb, dude. Give me a crumb of racism. Like, what are you doing? Come on, I'm Ben Shapiro. Let's say, hypothetically, you said you want to kill only 30% of the Latinos coming through the southern border. Hypothetically, that would be a unifying front that you are putting on. Let's say, hypothetically, you only want to jail 50% of the Mexican babies. That would be a cause for unity.
Policies. But there are certain areas of American life where there happens to be fairly wide bipartisan support. Biden, with his initial executive orders, is jumping precisely into the areas where there is not significant...
Wait, what the fuck does that mean? Unity is when you allow Donald Trump's executive orders to continue without reversing it, as though every single American president has done time and time again. This is unity. Unity is allowing Donald Trump's executive orders to continue without reversing those decisions with your own set of executive orders, as every single president has done again and again and again. That's how you do unity.
Significant American bipartisan support. So to take a perfect example, he has decided that he is throwing out the 1776 Commission. The commission was done by...
There is no bipartisan support for the 1776 Commission. What the fuck are you talking about? Let's say, hypothetically, we assume that something that I like in the form of 1776 Commission is something that we need to have, because it'll really hurt my feelings if you hypothetically, destroyed that committee.
By President Trump, who was meant to rebut the 1619 Project, which is a fictionalized piece of propaganda put out.
Okay, 1619 Project is the New York Times. 1776 Commission is literally an executive order created by the government. Shut the fuck up, okay? You are making a false equivalence here. If Joe Biden said we're going to do the 1619 Commission now, then you could have a more legitimate argument. Do not even try to tell me that, like, some school districts are utilizing the 1619 Commission, or not commission, the 1619 research or project as a part of their curriculum. Again, that's entirely up to the states. It's like the fucking daughters of the Confederacy advocating for whitewashing the Confederacy history very successfully in southern states, and adding that into their fucking curriculum. It's idiotic. Also, one is closer to the truth than the other one. Sorry, the 1619 Project is infinitely closer to the fucking truth than what the Daughters of the Confederacy has done. Also, the 1776 Commission is literally just like fascist bullshit. And there is a reason why they did it in the last day of the fucking presidency, because they knew that they were going to reverse that anyway.
Out by Nicole Hannah-Jones and the New York Times. The basic idea of which is that America is rooted in and steeped in racism and bigotry. So Trump put together a commission that was supposed to re-inculcate American values and rebut a lot of those ideas. Biden's killing that one immediately.
It's not unity, because Biden is killing something that Donald Trump totally made up. Like, at least with the New York Times Project, like, there are historians that disagree with the 1619 project, right? There are historians that disagree with it. Who the fuck was the historian that they even looked at for the 1776 Commission started by the government, again, which is very different than the fucking New York Times doing a project, okay? Who were the historians that were consulted? Yeah, I just made it up, okay? I made it up. I want to do a 70-76 commission which says white is right going forward. And if you want to fucking eliminate that, well, then you're the real racist.
Suggested that he's going to simply stop enforcing immigration laws in certain ways, the same way that Barack Obama did, so as to make it a lot easier to illegally immigrate to the United States. He has suggested he's going to jump right back into the Paris Climate Accords. The Paris Climate Accords are maybe the most useless piece of paper ever written upon.
And why are you crying about it? He's not even wrong, by the way. The Paris Climate Accords are literally fucking useless. For all of the people who are crying about it, or were crying about it before and are now crying about it, what is way more significant is like the personal jurisdiction that mayors and state officials have over what kind of fucking emissions restrictions that they're going to put in place. Okay, that is more significant, and that's precisely why even after Donald Trump said we're pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, every fucking governor was like, no, we're still going to continue on with the emissions restriction protocols set in place. There are way more significant problems that the Donald Trump administration did. It's largely symbolic that he said he's going to get out of the fucking Paris Climate Accord, okay? Like, it was symbolic. And just like it is a useless piece of paper, I guess, it's symbolic that Joe Biden said we have our commitment to the Paris Climate Accord and we're going to reaffirm that. It's entirely performative. Ben even understands that it's performative, and yet he's still fucking crying about it. So what the fuck are you crying about if it's purely performative, you dumb fuck? Sorry. It's also top of the hour every hour, 6-second ad break. I'm gonna run the ad right now. If you want to no longer see the ads, all you need to do is subscribe. You can do it for $5 or you can do it for free with a Twitch Prime. And then after that, we're gonna continue on this video, okay? Twitch Prime you can get by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account. Here's the ad. Anyway, fucking ad every second. Yeah, dude, I'm running ads every second. Except, no, I'm not. I'm running ads every hour for 60 seconds in the top of the hour.
Basically suggests that a bunch of nations are going to commit to targets that they have no proposals for actually hitting, but the goal is to shame everybody who's not a member of the Paris Climate Accord. He's appointing people who are unqualified for their positions solely on the basis of their identity group. He has a new Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services who is transgender. That is the only headline.
Wait, what the fuck? Wait. The trans secretary, like, I'm so confused. I'm so confused. Like, why are you fucking saying that that she has no qualifications other than being trans? How is that in any way? Like, that's literally just saying like black people have no qualifications for the jobs that they have outside of being black. Like, that's why you hired. Or a woman that has no qualifications for the position that they're in outside of. You sound kind of mad, bro. Just chill, bro. I mean, that's fucking insane. That's insane to fucking throw out something so incredibly bigoted. What the fuck kind of qualifications do you have, dumbass? Like, yeah, I'm fucking mad, dude. Of course I'm mad. It's just straight up fucking transphobic. You're relying on the fact that other people who are listening to you are going to be transphobic to agree with you and say, yeah, they have no qualifications. Why shouldn't I be mad? It's nuts to say that Rachel Levine, or Levine, however you say it, has no fucking qualifications for the position that she got as a top health official after she was Pennsylvania's top health official. As Pennsylvania's Secretary of Health, Levine has risen to the national prominence for leading the state's public health response to the coronavirus pandemic despite repeated and ugly attacks on her gender identity. She was already confirmed 3 times by the Republican-controlled state Senate to serve as the Secretary of Health and the state's Physician General. Like, what do you want? Why are you... Where did he say she had no qualifications except their sexuality? You're making shit up to fit your narrative?
That is positive groups. He has a new assistant who are on Health and Human Services who is transgender. That is the only headline that is positive about this person. This person also happens to Health and Human Services for their positions solely on the basis of their identity groups. He has a new who are unqualified for their positions solely on the basis of their identity groups. He has a new who are unqualified for their positions solely on the basis of their identity groups. He has a new Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services who is...
What do you think that means? Should I replay it again? Because, I mean, listen, you're a conservative, so automatically I assume that, like, a part of your brain is missing. But what do you think it means when... What do you think it means when Ben Shapiro says... Joe Biden is appointing people into prominent positions despite having no qualifications for said positions. And then he follows it up by saying, you know, the trans secretary. What do you think he means by that? Also, why are conservatives such fucking pussies, dude? Just own it. Like, it's so funny that, like, you literally want to say transphobic shit, but when you're called out, you're like, oh, that's just not what I meant. Just fucking own it. We already know you're a fucking transphobe. Just own it, you dumb fuck. You took him out of context. It's so stupid. Like, what is your fucking fear there in that situation? Like, you've already outed yourself as being a fucking moron, and not just because you're a transphobe, but like because you're a Ben Shapiro fan. So you've already you have. Don't worry, you can be as stupid as you want going forward. We're definitely going to make fun of you regardless because you're a Ben Shapiro fan. You are literally defending Ben Shapiro.
Transgender. That is the only headline that is positive about this person. This person also happens to have been the Secretary of Health and Human Services in the state of Pennsylvania, who shipped COVID-positive old people back into nursing homes. So on the con side would be killed a bunch of olds.
Wait, I'm sorry. That's really interesting that Ben's saying that, because if I recall, Ben was saying, you know, if the economy gets started, but if you're over the age of 78, you know, and they die, if old people die, then they're living on borrowed time anyway. Of course, not understanding how average life expectancies work, and if people immediately started dying after the age of 78, then that would lower the average life expectancy, but that's basic mathematics, so that's going to be very difficult for Ben to comprehend with his big city lawyer degree from Harvard, but that's rather strange. Huh. Interesting.
In Pennsylvania via COVID. And on the pros would be, is a man who believes that he is a...
Ben Shapiro suggests older people dying of COVID-19 is tragic, but also not so bad. Oh yeah, by the way, he did say that, you dumb fucks.
Trying to balance the risks and rewards here is a difficult thing. The easiest thing you can do is say, all damages caused are caused by the pandemic. All of the good things that are happening, like you being alive, that is caused by me, right? It's sort of the Gretchen Whitmer strategy in Michigan. And, right. and that's a very easy thing to say, but in reality, you know, not only are there countervailing issues on the other side, such as the fact that, you know, people are going to lose their jobs and their livelihoods and their dreams, and quality of life actually matters. But none of these governors are going to keep things locked down forever. I mean, Andrew Cuomo, when he said just save one life, 5 days later, he's saying we're going to open up parts of New York State. Okay, so which is it? I mean, obviously that means that more people are going to be infected. So we're always going to make this public policy consideration. Nobody just wants to say the obvious truth, which is that we're all making actuarial deductions about what are the costs in terms of how many human lives, how many years of life, because that is an actual issue in actuarial tables, right? If somebody who is 81 dies of COVID-19, that is not the same thing as somebody who is 30 dying of COVID-19. I mean, if this were killing children, everyone would be in for lockdown forever. That's the reality, right? If a bunch of 5-year-olds were dying of COVID-19 and people were saying get back to work, I'd be like, nope, I'm not letting my 5-year-old die. If grandma dies in a nursing home at age 81, and it's tragic and it's terrible. Also, life expectancy in the United States is 80. So that is not the same thing. In moral terms, you want to save every life you can. At the same time, to pretend that it is of the same calculation, the age of the person, no public policy acts like that. Not a single public policy in American life acts like that. Trying to balance.
But here he is again criticizing public policy after he already said that these healthcare considerations from epidemiologists factors in actuarial decisions on what happens with people's life expectancy. That's kind of weird. I mean, I think it's a heartless thing to fucking openly state, right? Especially because regardless, the entire purpose of healthcare policy is to minimize deaths no matter what happens, okay? But if that's your position and you are understanding of that, if you understand like, well, some people over the age of 81 or some people over the age of 78 are gonna fucking die, which would be literally the death panel argument that Republicans also used to make against Obamacare, then why the fuck are you shitting on someone who allowed older people to go back to care facilities after they had gotten COVID? Isn't that something that, or maybe it's just because, it's a Democrat doing it. I got it. Which is what it is. Like that's basically what it is. It's like when a Republican does it, it's all right. When a Democrat does it, it's not all right. And I'm going to criticize it no matter what.
We have heard from Janet Yellen and people in the economic side of the Biden administration that they wish to immediately rethink American policy on the basis of quote-unquote racial equity, which is to suggest discrimination, right? Because the idea here is not that we are going to try to create a functioning economy that works and that generates prosperity. The idea is going to be that if there's inequality between racial groups, that can be rectified by redistributionism between racial groups via economic policy. Now, we've heard that Joe Biden wants to put back in place the entire team that negotiated the Iran nuclear deal, a deal that was, in fact, so damaging to a lot of our allies in the Middle East that it ended up almost solving the Israeli-Arab dispute because so many people hated the Iran nuclear deal. And his allies in Congress are encouraging him that if he can't get congressional support for this sort of stuff, as James Clyburn suggested, he should just...
The Iran nuclear deal is probably one of the greatest foreign policy accomplishments that the Obama administration had. I've been incredibly critical of the Obama administration's foreign policy decisions. Outside of that, Iran was following the terms of that denuclearization agreement, regardless of the fact that America literally fucking said under Donald Trump that they were going to pull out of it. They still kept following it, according to third-party investigators from Europe. But it doesn't really matter. Ben Shabibo does not care about this at all, and he thinks that America should be able to renege on deals for no reason and just rip them for no reason other than the fact that we are America. How the fuck are you ever going to have peace deals conducted with countries that you consider to be foreign adversaries ever again if, the next time someone else fucking becomes president, they can just like shit on it? Straight.
Just go ahead and do it from the top.
If they're going to be recalcitrant, if they're going to throw up roadblocks...
Iran agreed to denuke, but they're still making nukes. KW. Iran literally agreed to denuclearize. They followed through on their end of that bargain. They literally followed through on that. Even after Donald Trump became president and said he's going to throw it out. And even after Donald Trump threw it out, Iran was still following through on the denuclearization agreement. But it doesn't fucking matter because Donald Trump followed through, put sanctions. By the way, Democrats voted on those sanctions as well, for the record. Literally fucking put sanctions on Iran despite the fact that they were following their end of the bargain. Okay? course, there is a country with a robust nuclear program. That country's name is Israel, but we will never talk about that because Israel is America's ally. So, there it is. Believing Iran, lol W. Man, shut the fuck up. Why the fuck should Iran ever believe America, bitch? This way of operating as though like other countries are not autonomous and that there aren't like human beings with their own thoughts and with their own interests of preserving themselves in these other countries is so fucking tired. Like, believing Iran, lol W. Why would Iran believe America? Build all the fucking nukes you want going forward. Why in the ever-loving fuck should Iran ever bargain with the United States of America ever again? In any fucking terms whatsoever. Build the fucking nukes all goddamn day now. We don't have this kind of conversation around Pakistan. Why, I wonder? They're a brown country, right? Because they already have the nukes. Israel literally went forward and assassinated a fucking top scientist on Iranian soil. It's like completely fucking beyond the pale. The shit that both America and Israel has done to Iran is literally completely unacceptable. Completely fucking unacceptable.
Go on without them. Use your executive authority if they refuse to cooperate.
Is that unity? Does that sound like truth versus lies? That brings us to the final question here, which is, okay, what do we do about it? As conservative, what do we do about all of this stuff? Alrighty, so Joe Biden tends to put me to sleep. I mean, he tends to put himself to sleep. But if he puts you to sleep and you actually need to stay awake, you do it.
What the fuck is he selling? Oh my god.
Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, and such to be bringing them into tens of millions of homes.
Right? We are seeing this in social media as well directly, where the tech bros have decided that they are simply going to cave to the Democrats in the hope that they will be left alone, or they actually agree with Democrats that a lot of the language they don't like is now going to be considered dangerous and ought to be banned. Okay, so what do we do about it? One, make sure the...
Listen, man, miss me with this bullshit. Anything that Ben Shapiro says about tech censorship is a complete lie, okay? One, the Daily Wire literally wrote like 8 fucking articles on me with the 9/11 dang Crenshaw shit specifically to try to get me banned. 2, Ben Shapiro is a massive advocate for the Canary mission, okay? Which is literally an institution built, an organization built specifically to dox people that they declare to be anti-Semitic. Some of those people are white supremacists and anti-Semitic, by the way. Don't get me wrong. There is legitimate anti-Semites and legitimate fucking fascists they're doxing. But then there's also random fucking brown people that are like registered nurses or some shit. And they've keyword searched Jew on their fucking profile to be like, all right, it's over. This guy's a fucking anti-Semite, kick this guy out of his job. So this notion that like, or BDS activists, by the way, which is the greatest part about it all. So Ben Shapiro claiming to be a fucking free speech advocate is a laughable notion, considering how much he fucking cries about boycott, divestment, and sanctions on the state of Israel, and how much BDS activists should deserve to get fucking fired from their positions. So get the fuck out of here. Tech censorship absolutely destroys the left way more than it fucking destroys Ben Shabibo. Mr. Ben Shabibo is literally straight up benefiting from Facebook, for example, working with the Heritage Foundation early on in consulting for tech censorship, a problem that they created. Conservatives consistently talk about tech censorship as a way to game the system in their favor, okay? That's all this is. It's kind of like how conservatives say elections are under attack. Election integrity is under attack so that they can justify voter suppression measures. This is how it works. They cry about tech censorship so that they can continue dominating the fucking algorithms. And it's very successful.
Actually get out and work for Republican congressional candidates in 2022. There is another election coming up. The party out of power typically does very well in the off-year elections. Right now, the Democrats have the slimmest governing majority in the House of Representatives in several generations that can easily be flipped. Easily be flipped. That means the Republicans have to get out there and work. They don't just have to get out there and work for candidates. They have to pressure their legislators and legislators at the state level to redo how voting is done so we don't have the fiasco that was universal mail-in balloting this time. It means better voter verification.
Universal mail-in balloting was a fiasco is such a fucking indecent, hack, fraudulent fucking thing to say. such an indecent thing to say. It is literally, you're just saying that you don't want people to vote. That's all you are fucking saying. That's all you are doing. That's all you are saying. Any sane country should hear, in any other country, if we were a sane country, we would hear someone say this and go, oh, fuck that guy. That guy hates democracy. Okay, suck my dick, and move on. And yet, here in America, that is a legitimate point of contention. Wow.
Verification, or ID. It is to suggest you need to vote on the day that the election is held. You better have a good excuse for not doing it that way. And it better be you when you actually vote. Right? That would help as well. You need to get Senator Joe Manchin on your speed dial. So Senator Joe Manchin is the sole force right now militating against the death of the filibuster in the United States Senate. If he starts to waver on that, I'm going to give you his phone number right now. If you're a West Virginian citizen particularly, you need to sound off to your senator. If he starts to waver on that principle 1 iota, his number is 304-342-5855. You're going to have to hold his feet to the fire to stop him from violating...
No, that's not doxing, guys. Come on. It's like their office. Of course, that's normal. Stop being babies. It's not doxing. It's like literally his fucking office number. And it's a completely normal thing to get people to engage in these sorts of call campaigns. It's pretty funny, though, that he is a Republican trying to get Republican watchers in his audience to call a Democratic senator. Tells you a lot about Joe Manchin and where he stands on the political spectrum, but, you know, that's besides the point, of course. All right, let's
fundamental norms and getting rid of the filibuster. Once the filibuster is gone, Democrats can, with a simple 50 plus Kamala Harris votes, add states like Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, adding 4 Democratic senators. They can move.
Oh my God, that would be so terrifying if there was more representation. Honestly, again, I am literally shaking, dude. I am shitting my pants. I'm shitting, pissing, and coming. Thinking about more representation from areas and territories. Wow. Fuck, that would be disastrous, dude. Disastrous. Absolutely unacceptable.
Forward theoretically with packing the Supreme Court. And they could move forward with completely rewriting broad swaths of American law. So Joe Manchin stands between the Republic in that sense and a sort of crack up that faces us if, with the barest of bare majorities, Democrats start cramming down extraordinary top-down policy. States that are red should start protecting their citizens from the predations of national institutions. If the social media bros decide that they are simply going to violate these sort of free speech rights that you would have were this a public sector company by cracking down on dissent in monopolistic fashion, right? Coordinating, then all deciding that certain views are out of the debate and out of the domain of normal public discourse, states are going to have to step in. We've started to see this in some states, proposals being put forth that any ISP that discriminates, any cable provider that discriminates on the basis of politics, any social media network that discriminates on the basis of politics, will not be able to operate in a particular state, that restrictions will be placed on those companies. I'm not a fan of using this sort of interventionism with regard to these companies, but if the companies have basically centralized all the power to control your speech in the public forum, then I don't see a whole hell of a lot of protections outside of state governments, especially if the federal government is forcing a lot of this. Conservatives are going to have to get very active.
Wait, by the way, guys, Ben Shabibo was anti-net neutrality. Like, I'm not even kidding. Ben Shabibo was literally advocating against net neutrality, which Ajit Pai, Donald Trump's FCC, like head of FCC, repealed. Ben Shabibo, while that was happening, straight up was against net neutrality, and not only that, but I have a video on it. Like, I literally did a video on Ben Shabibo being anti-net neutrality, which was so psychotic that even his audience was getting mad at him over. I actually have the fucking... I actually have the receipts, like, literally right here.
Given how the internet has become...
Here it is.
I'm such an important part of how we learn. So I don't believe in net neutrality.
I'm not just going to talk about net neutrality today, which died this past week. I'm also going to use this clip to illustrate how Ben Shapiro covers net neutrality with incredibly disingenuous framing to manipulate his viewers into believing standing against net neutrality is not only the logical opinion, but the one that will more effectively help the little guy. And then he also frames it against liberals, as if only liberals are against net neutrality, when 83% of the country was against it.
It was only put into place in the last couple of years of the Obama administration. And before that, the internet was working just fine.
How intellectually dishonest of you to never once mention why these regulations were put into place to begin with. So let me do that instead. Net neutrality was established under Obama after consumers found out that Verizon was throttling Netflix's speed right around the time that Verizon was also entering the content space with their own video streaming service to compete with, wait for it, Netflix. Verizon Go 90 is what it's called. By the way, we also have a show on. What Ben's fighting against here is basically the will of the people. Grassroots mobilization of the democratic process actually works. Net neutrality is an incredibly popular idea consumers wanted, competing against $50 million of lobbying in the interest of big corporations. But go on, Ben, tell us more.
Net neutrality is basically the suggestion that internet service providers have to supply traffic, supply all use of traffic the same price. So Netflix, which eats up an enormous amount of bandwidth, has to be charged the same as some schmo in his basement who is just loading up his blog.
Yeah, you're right, Ben. Netflix is using the same $50 a month internet package that I use to post my #MCN thirst traps on Instagram, but instead to run their global video streaming operation. By the way, follow me on Instagram. How dumb do you think your audience is, Ben? Also, Netflix is already paying ransom money for...
God, I'm so cringe. I can't even watch this anymore. Anyway, but yeah, he was... The point is, he was pro-net neutrality, or sorry, he was anti-net neutrality, and now he is in favor of it because he's a disingenuous asshat who only defends Republicans, and that's pretty much what he does, and that's it. Pretty much all there needs to be said about this situation. Oh, fucking cringe. Holy shit. I'm cringe too. You want to watch the rest of this? Go ahead.
Bandwidth that they use. Repealing net neutrality will allow ISPs to do that not just to Netflix, but to every company, including the schmoes, as you call it, and charge additional money to all apps and small businesses, essentially destroying the meritocracy that the internet has been thus far. The internet was a free market, Ben. Why change that? Don't you love the free market?
The reality is that if you're taking up a huge share of the bandwidth, then there might be companies that say, we will provide you a faster access, but you have to pay more money.
Ben Shapiro describes how high-speed internet packages work. Liberals are triggered. Oh!
It's not incumbent on internet service providers to be forced to be treated like public utilities.
Except they are public utilities, Ben, and should be treated as such, since they need an incredible amount of infrastructural support from the government.
The way to think of it is that internet service providers are like the pipes.
Wait, Ben, that sounds a lot like a public utility, like water.
The content of the internet is like water.
Oh. That's a public utility, you moron! You think they teach you how to argue better at Harvard Law?
So you can think of it in two ways. It's a public utility. Everybody should be able to turn on the tap at the same time and get the water.
Yeah, which is how it was enforced under net neutrality.
Or that the pipe company should be able to charge you what they want, or charge the water company what it wants for the water moving through the pipes.
Which is what will happen now that net neutrality has been repealed.
It's not quite like a pipe.
Wait, what? But you just said it was like a pipe a moment ago. Is it a pipe or is it not a pipe?
Because you can have multiple pipes, right? There are multiple internet service providers.
Except there aren't multiple internet service providers. Just look at this map of Minneapolis where two companies have split this entire city like a gang war. Or look at LA where Time Warner and Charter are basically like the Bloods and Crips. Gang gang. Dab on us. Oh wait, that's an old map. Those two companies actually merged to provide the absolute shittiest service to me under the new brand Spectrum. Fuck you, Spectrum.
One of the reasons that net neutrality has
Yeah, I fucking dabbed. Shut up.
become such an issue is because of special deals with local governments by a lot of the internet service providers, so the only providers in their region.
I'm gonna stop you right here, Ben. First off, the fact that there's no competition isn't just local government deals, you lying sack of shit. That's one of those mergers these massive ISPs love. These ISPs you're trying to paint as the victims here. More importantly though, Ben is using one of his key debate tactics here, and it's important for you and everyone else to see it, because he loves leading us down these rabbit holes with these bullshit, oversimplified analogies that he delivers with conviction as though they're remotely realistic. They're not. It's not even a rabbit hole because that would imply there's depth to Ben's arguments. So I'm just gonna call it the Ben hole. where you build an argument around a faulty analogy and then launch retorts from this new world you created, and anyone trying to dismantle your concepts have to do it from Ben's hole. So now that we've identified this, I'm not going to waste any more time trying to correct his insane talking points and address the larger concepts that he's trying to advance.
If there were open competition, you'd actually see competition, like older people who only want to watch TV but don't actually want to use Netflix or Hulu. They should be able to get the internet cheaper.
Yeah, there isn't competition, you're right about that, except the payment structure you're pushing for already exists within cheaper, lower bandwidth options. If you only use the internet for checking emails, then you buy a slower package. If you binge watch anime like me, you buy the fastest package possible and then get angry during peak hours when they slow your internet down anyway.
There's nothing wrong with any of this. This is why when people say it's a corporate giveaway to get rid of net neutrality, there are major corporations like Google and Netflix who basically want to prevent smaller companies from being able to take advantage of differential pricing on ISPs to compete with them.
You're providing zero evidence that Google and Netflix's nefarious reasons, while then trying to paint them as big corporations against, what, the little guys, Verizon and Spectrum? What's going on in your hole, Ben? You make it seem as though ending net neutrality will somehow benefit consumers, but the truth is that ending net neutrality will only stand to make ISPs able to control the internet services in an even more tyrannical way. It's like saying getting rid of The Last Jedi will allow the Empire to finally control the universe in a way that benefits consumers.
Bottom line is the internet was fine before anybody started messing with it. The odd passion over net neutrality has always puzzled me.
This is literally the whole dumb argument wrapped up into one sentence. Don't be fooled by the pizzazz Ben Shapiro has. He's no gladiator, unlike what the New York Times would suggest. He's simply doing what he does best, which is defending the interests of big corporations and the wealthy against the interests of you, the actual little guy. So if you're like me and you're fed up seeing Ben Shapiro all over your timeline, please share this video with your friends and also leave me a comment telling me if you want me to continue doing more Ben Shapiro videos. Please leave me a follow on Instagram, HasanAbi, and on Twitter, HasanAbi. And this has been The Breakdown.
Shut up, I did a fucking, yes. Yes. I did a Star Wars reference too. I hit all the fucking cringe notes.
In the legal arena, Democrats have for decades used the power of the judicial branch in order to get policy done that they couldn't get done at the legislative level. People on the
Pure projection from Ben Shabibo here, by the way. Yes, that's literally shot inside of a fucking closet. Fuck you. No, it's not frozen rice. I got a drink before at some point, but
the right need to coordinate in terms of the lawsuits that they are filing in order to uphold their rights in the face of discrimination on the basis of religion or violation of freedom of religion, on the basis of free speech rights. And all these things are going to have to get litigated in court. And then finally, on an interpersonal level, we're going to have to talk with one another. We're going to have to stop hunkering down in the silos that we've built for ourselves. And we are going to actually have to start talking with one another, convincing.
Seems like my main man Shabibo no longer has any power, or at least his will. A little worried that his will not be represented in the administration. So now he's like, come on, we gotta fucking talk to one another, dude. Come on. Sounds like fucking loser talk to me, brother. That's what it sounds like. Smells like fucking loser in here, dude. Guess what? Sorry, you lost, bitch. This notion that, like, we gotta fucking talk to Republicans or we gotta spare Republicans their feelings. Yeah, fuck that.
Seeing one another, treating each other with respect. Weirdly enough, that's exactly what Joe Biden advocated for in his inaugural address. I hope that he takes it seriously. I certainly do. And I hope that we have those conversations. If we do, then I think that the next few years could actually be bright. I think that we could actually start moving beyond the partisan polarization that we have seen. I don't have a lot of faith that that's what's going to happen, but I think that if you engage with your neighbors and with your family, then that is the best possible outcome, and that will shift hearts, and that will shift minds, and will make people more conservative over the course of time. Final note, there's one other thing you can do, and that is you should support alternative institutions to the institutions that exist and are discriminating against conservatives and intend to crack down on conservatives. If you don't like the establishment media...
Oh my god, shut the fuck up, bitch.
But getting assistance when it's needed most can make a game far more enjoyable. It bridges the gap between a games expect players to already know and what they actually do know. Most of the frustration that the media have had while playing boiled down to not being able to figure things out that she didn't know existed, which is something that would have been solved had I not just been a silent observer. Given that I was, though, she found herself continuing to have problems, and one of those is summed up best by her most frequently asked question. When it came to the 2D platformers, navigating wasn't especially difficult for her. Because the options were limited, it was pretty easy for her to figure out that she needed to go right and sometimes up. Celeste and Shovel Knight do have a few optional rooms players can go in, but for the most part, whenever she entered one, she could tell it wasn't the path she wanted to take. Although Shovel Knight does have a side room in the tutorial that heads to the right and seems like the main path despite not being it, and there was a fair amount of disappointment as she realized she did all that work for nothing.
Are you fucking kidding me?
However, for all the 3D games, navigating proved far more difficult. She spent a lot of time wrestling with the camera in third-person games, and she wasn't all that great at moving and looking around at the same time in first-person games. Due to her not rotating the camera around a ton, she didn't always get a great sense of her surroundings, so she struggled with figuring out where she was and where she was going. Like in Skyrim, she missed the jump from the tower to the house during the tutorial, and it took a while for her to realize that she had fallen back to the spot where she started. Also, because she wasn't good at focusing her camera, she didn't realize she was supposed to be following Hadvar, so she was sort of just strolling along, trying to get out of the city in her own way. Once she did follow him and got into a building, she was more interested in picking up everything she saw instead of moving forward, which actually is fair in how most people play Skyrim. Either way, she wasn't fully sure where to go. Interestingly, after we finished all the games, I brought up the footage of Skyrim and showed her the compass at the top of the screen, and she said that she hadn't noticed it while playing, as she was mostly just focused on what was directly in front of her. The same thing happened with Doom's compass and even the health bars of enemies and bosses in Dark Souls. She typically noticed waypoints on the screen when they showed up, but she didn't know what they were for, so she often ignored them. Players are hit with a lot of information when they play games, and for ones who aren't all that comfortable with the basics, a lot of that information is pushed to the side, acting as another barrier for entry. Another thing that confused her was when progression in a level wasn't entirely linear. Like with Dark Souls, she got confused when the level moved back around on itself, and she made the assumption that she had messed up and gone the wrong way. Most of the games she had played before Dark Souls had typical progression, so finding herself back near where she started felt odd. Even the 3D games that seemed like they might be more straightforward had a few things that ended up being confusing for her. For example, in Uncharted 2, what a player can climb is indicated by being colored yellow, but that wasn't obvious to her, so she constantly tried to climb things that just looked like they could be climbed. And then she questioned why she had to take the longer, more roundabout path when there were perfectly good handholds right above her. A similar issue with signaling happened with The Last of Us as well. There's a part where the player has to run through a city to escape, and a gas station explodes, causing street lamps and other things to block the road ahead. My wife noticed a little gap on the sidewalk that was untouched by fire, so she kept trying to run through that to get out, but every time she did, the infected came and killed her. This made her think that the issue wasn't with it being the wrong way to go, but rather with her not being fast enough, so she kept trying that same path over and over before finally finding the right way. With game design, there's often a battle between having a level look realistic and making it easy to navigate. In this example, Naughty Dog tried to make the city feel more natural by not having every path be physically blocked off. And while more experienced players will most likely see the explosion and assume they should go a different way, the game falls short on helping players who don't understand what they're supposed to do. By having the signal be the explosion, but the consequence being an attack by the infected, she learned the wrong lesson. And this sort of thing ended up happening to her a fair amount throughout the process, even with things that had nothing to do with navigation. Sometimes she just interpreted the information the game was giving her in the wrong way, and she found herself. The idea that some games teach players how to play simply through gameplay and level design is a pretty common talking point in the video game community. I'm a firm believer that a lot of games do this, and watching her play reaffirmed that thought. For example, in Doom, her initial instinct was to stay as far away from enemies as possible, because she didn't feel all that comfortable with the controls of the first-person shooter. However, once she came across enemies who threw fireballs at her from a distance that did way more damage than she could do from that same range, she started to realize that her best bet was to get close to enemies and either hit the crap out of them or use the shotgun. Ultimately, Doom is meant to be played this way. The glory kill system and the handful of weapons that are powerful at close range are included to push a fast-paced, action-packed fighting style. And having one of the first rooms be extremely difficult to beat without playing this way sets the expectation for the rest of the game. It took her a fair bit of banging her head against the wall to get past this room. But once she did, she was better at the core mechanics of the game than when she started. With that said, what I found even more interesting than when she learned the right lessons of how to play a game through gameplay was when she learned the wrong ones. The first instance of this that I noticed happened while playing Mario 1-1. At the beginning of the level, there's a question mark box with a mushroom in it. She had some familiarity with the Mario franchise, so she knew that mushrooms were good to get. However, after hitting the box, she jumped into a different block, causing the mushroom to change directions and go off the left side of the screen, out of reach. She didn't register that she had caused the mushroom to change directions, leading her to the assumption that mushrooms would always end up going to the left. When she got to another block that she suspected held the mushroom, she hit it and immediately moved to the left to grab it before it went off screen, and... well... This was a far less intrusive lesson to get wrong than the ones that came up while she played Celeste and Shovel Knight. The tutorial of Celeste is a pretty simple stage that ends with the player learning how to dash, which is arguably the most important and useful mechanic in the game. The lady I live with interpreted the prompt to mean that the only way to dash was by doing it at an upward angle, pretty much crippling her ability to do screens effectively until after 15 minutes or so when she accidentally dashed horizontally and realized her moveset was wider than she had thought. With Shovel Knight, early on she died from hitting this bubble. A bag of gold popped out and hovered near it. On her next time through, she jumped on the bubble and the bag at the same time and assumed that both things had damaged her, causing her to think that the bags of gold were an enemy of some sort. So when she came across them after that, she would either try to attack them or actively avoid them. As she wasn't paying terribly close attention to the HUD, she never realized what they actually did. I'm not saying that these things are the faults of the game developers, but it is interesting how easily information on screen can be misunderstood. These sort of things can happen to players of all skill levels, but given her lack of experience, she didn't have much else to go on to challenge the lessons she thought she had learned. I found the disconnect between how she thought games worked and how they actually worked to be pretty intriguing. And as I focused more on those differences, I started to notice a sort of trend with every title she played. That being... when most people talk about what any video game is like, there's often great focus on the general actions players can do rather than the limitations that make it possible for the game to function. For example, Mass Effect could be described as a role-playing game where, among other things, players get the opportunity to talk to and form relationships with various characters across the universe. People who play a lot of games will most likely go in understanding that this actually means players will be able to form relationships with a predetermined cast of characters by choosing responses from a set of limited dialogue options. As it turns out, this formula makes for a really great series, but there is a gap between what a game sounds like and what it actually looks like. And I think for people who don't end up playing a lot of games, but have to suffer through listening to their friends or partners talk about them, they get a warped perception about what players can do in a title because they don't understand or know the systems the games use in order to give these grand sounding experiences. Where I know to apply a sort of video game logic to any title I play, the lady I live with was always trying to apply a real world logic. Like in the Doom tutorial, there's a gore nest that the player needs to destroy. A waypoint marker shows up on it, which when I first played, I knew meant I needed to go up to it and most likely hit a button prompt. When my wife played, she didn't know what the marker meant, so her initial instinct wasn't to walk right up to it. Instead, she noticed while messing around that the red barrels exploded, so she had the idea to try to push one of the barrels towards the nest to blow it up. And this is objectively more interesting than just pressing a button to destroy it. But of course, it didn't work. Throughout the various games, a pretty common question she asked was, why can't I do it this way? And my response was, because. The deeper answer is that limitations exist in games because there are only so many potential inputs a title can have, meaning there are a finite number of ways a player can interact with things. If developers tried to program in every possible way a player might think about interacting with something, games would just never come out. I'm used to these limitations. I actually appreciate them in a lot of instances. However, for her, she got frustrated when the ideas she came up with didn't work. Like while scaling the train in Uncharted 2, she reached a point where she wanted to swing from a pipe and through a window. So when she realized she had to take the predetermined path that didn't take much more than pressing left, she felt disappointed because, yeah, her idea was cooler. In Skyrim, as Alduin began attacking the city, she found a spot in a house and figured she'd just wait it out until he left. But due to the scripted nature of this part of the game, that plan didn't work, forcing her to follow the path the game wanted her to follow. In turn, this took away all the tension of the section because she knew she could take as long as she wanted and nothing bad would happen. Hiding in a house isn't that fun of a way to play a game, but her not being able to made her feel like she lost some agency. Her expectations for what she thought she could do in each game were always different than the reality, and I think as she realized that games were more simple than she had first assumed, some of the intrigue about them faded. For the lady I live with, the thing she hated more than anything else about this experiment was having to replay sections of a level over and over again after dying. Had I not told her to keep trying on a handful of the games, she would have stopped far sooner, because it was understandably frustrating. With that said, when she did stick with games that frustrated her and ended up beating the parts that she struggled with, she found it exhilarating. I think this trade-off of dealing with frustration so that the excitement of beating something is all that much sweeter is one that people who play a lot of games not only understand, but look for. However, trying to pitch that she should spend her free time doing something that actively frustrates her so that the few moments where she succeeds feel glorious is a bit of a tough look. This little test has me questioning how I became interested in video games in the first place. I don't remember how they became such a big part of my life. I don't know how I got to the point where I could look at a compass at the top of the screen and know what to expect from every marker without looking them up. I don't know how I first learned about stamina bars and the various ways to make sure I don't run out of energy. I don't know how I became, I guess, fluent in the language of video games. I'm just glad that I learned the basics when I was young enough to not care about spending hours on one level. For a better understanding of how inexperienced players approach video games, I need to run a much wider and more complex study that tests in a more robust way than just sitting down to watch my wife play video games a few times. But I did find it interesting to compare how wildly different my approach to games is to hers. And while I definitely don't have enough definitive information to make any sort of legitimate conclusion about how inexperienced players approach games, I do want to say this. In a similar way to how it is harder to learn a language as an adult, it's harder to get into video games after a lifetime of not playing them. And from what I've seen, that seems to have less to do with interest and more to do with struggling to get over the barriers that exist for new players. Like, if you don't know how to read, why would you pick up a book? What I'm getting at is if someone you know who doesn't play games expresses interest in trying one, don't force them to be in an experiment where you give no guidance and mostly just watch them struggle with something that they never learned how to do. Teach them how to read it instead.
Has been a significant topic for ages, from Rodney King to defunding the police to Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. We are in a moment where we are examining how laws are enforced and when they are broken, how we are treated. These are topics and issues that we don't often get a chance to hear cops speak on themselves. When watching this video, please remember that these officers are speaking from their own personal beliefs and drawing from their own experiences. Seek out experts, do your own research, and have empathy.
Oh my god. Or did they do like a pro cop episode? I feel like.
My name is Evan, 5 years old here in Washington, D.C. Born and raised in Washington, D.C. as well.
Hey guys, there are many things to talk about in this video about this build, so check timestamps if you wanna jump to a certain part of the video. So to start off, what is this? This is a Deadeye using Fireball, but also focusing on Scorch and Scorch is like it just lowers enemy resistances. So Deadeye is a bit unusual for spellcasters, but the new Deadeye nodes do have some interesting things even for spellcasters. Like it does now have a ricochet node which does allow projectiles to bounce off walls. Also, it does have +2 additional projectiles. And of course, Deadeye does have Tailwind, which does give all action speed, including cast speed, and some interesting defensive layers. Also, just quickly, is it just me, or does Fireball have new visuals now? I think it has new visuals. By the way, the Fireball MTX still looks kind of the same. It still looks like it has bigger AoE with MTX, but it's just a visual. I actually prefer default look without the MTX. It just looks cooler, and also it looks so cool when the projectiles bounce off wall. I think that just looks so cool. So that was the idea, to play with the Deadeye, with the chain, with the ricochet, getting extra projectiles, and then trying to get enough crit chance, crit multi, and somehow survive. I'm gonna try to answer a couple questions that you may have, like for example, how does it function with the Hydra Sphere? How does it explode when it chains? Does it work well with Fury Valve, Amulet, and stuff like that? Okay, so overall the build is it's hard to explain. It's for the clear speed it's good, but for single target it's not very good. Imagine that every build would have like a base viability, and when you get a good build with high base viability, then you don't need much investment, but the more you invest, the higher the damage just gets, almost exponentially, and you can invest a lot to get a lot more damage. But for this, I would say it has low base viability, so you have to invest to make it just viable for red tier maps. And that's what I did. I actually invested quite a bit. Not that much, you know, I usually make it like a budget builds, but I had to invest and get certain items to make this more viable for red tier maps, and it can clear red tier maps, but forcing is not very pleasant with this. Also, another thing, despite only having 5,300 life, I am surprisingly tanky. Like, I could not believe how tanky I am. That's another thing. Like, if you're gonna be playing a build like this, or just a copy of this build, you may actually feel squishy until you get all the things that I'm gonna talk about later on. And once you get those things, then the build actually feels tanky. You just don't get hit, and when you do get hit, you take like 50% reduced damage or less damage. So it's making this kind of spellcaster very tanky. Now, normally when you get, the more damage you get, the more kind of fake tankiness you feel like you're getting, because you're just destroying enemies before they can hurt you. With this kind of low damage, it's very obvious that the build has good defensive layers, because I can still defeat some of the endgame bosses deathless with no real damage. I mean, I do have over 1 million DPS, but it has so many conditional things